to take part in this. I would love to see if people are online, if they want to turn on their video. Maybe it's too early in the morning and people are still in their pajamas, so you don't want to pajamas on the weekend and you don't want to show your video, but it would make it more interesting for me to see that. And in addition, I have typed into the chat box here on Zoom. I'm curious to know where everybody is dialing in from. I was actually in India for the first time this year in January, so just before the craziness of Corona started. So I know a little bit about the geography of India. I was in Delhi and Mumbai and in Jamnagar. I went to visit the Reliance facility in Jamnagar. And I don't know if we have anybody from Reliance on the call today, but please say hi if you do. Did you say we did?
Yes. Hello, sir.
Great. Excellent. You're from Reliance?
John? We are from different states. So, India has south, north, east, west. So people are from different states.
Great. Excellent. Well, good to see everybody. And I see there's some people are typing into the chat where you're from, and that's great. I see people from Shilpa from Rajasthan, which is somewhere that I visited. I visited to Jaipur, somebody from Chennai, which I know is in the south. Well, excellent. And so I have a few slides that I prepared on this topic. What I'd really like to do is to talk about the is to get through to the Q&A, and I'd love to hear any questions that anybody might have. So I'll try to go through the slides as quickly as I can. If you have questions for me during the slides, you can type them into the box, and that will let me know that there are questions, and then I hope we could have a discussion at the end. And I have a particular interest in one topic that I've been learning about recently, which is that of prana or life energy, which I'm very curious about, because as a scientist, and I have a PhD in cell molecular biology, I'm actually very skeptical. I've been skeptical of all kinds of things around spirituality or chi or meditation and things like this. And most recently, I've actually unlocked quite a few interesting things in my mind, in particular Kundalini yoga, and this ability to send an energy signal from my brain down my spine and out of my feet. It's just completely amazed me that this is possible. And part of it was that I was exploring some of these things when I was in India in January, visiting various people and trying different things out.
Have you been to Pondicherry?
No, I haven't been to Pondicherry before. Why do you ask?
It's a nice place, basically.
Remind me where.
Because you're talking about meditation and many foreigners come there, French people and.
Well, great.
Auroville, yeah.
Yeah, so I know that isn't the topic of today's conference or particularly about natural products, but it's made me extremely curious about what's going on in biology at the molecular level for some of these phenomena that we don't understand. We don't have language to talk about it outside in science, outside of spirituality, and we don't have measuring devices to measure it, and we don't have data to gather. So if anybody's interested in talking about that, that would be a topic that I'd love to talk about.
Definitely, there will be many people. So they will be surprised to see you today opening the session like that. They were thinking synthetic biology, and suddenly pops the spirituality. And we think that is a path to self-realization, and it's a great topic to talk in length, I suppose. Maybe later. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, let us dive in 1 second, and excuse me, let me see. Just going to try to share my slides here. Okay, can you let me know? Can you see my screen right now with the slides on it?
Yes. If you do as a slideshow, it will come as a full screen.
Perfect. So as I said, please do type in any questions into the box that you might have. So the global growth of the synthetic biology industry, if we think about what is biology, Well, biology is a very versatile technology for making flavor ingredients for beer that you can see: hops, barley, water. But the real key piece that's missing is the yeast that you use to convert all of those things into the alcohol that we then drink. The same for cheese. If you think about the product of cheese, or the process of making cheese, which is around the conversion of milk into cheese, again, it's biology at the core that is the product for making cheese, but it's the hidden technology behind it. We don't actually know what the organism is many times that's used to make cheese, or at least it's not on the label for the cheese that you buy. Or if we think about other food production technologies, this is a spirulina farm, an algae farm in Hawaii for the production of a complete protein source, this cyanobacteria, spirulina. Or this Romanescu broccoli, which is a cross between broccoli and cauliflower. It's a thing that's edible, but it's also a thing of amazing beauty when you see the shapes that biology can make. When we think about bread, or we think about fermented food that I ate in India, like idli or dosa, you can see that the biology is used for producing CO2, for the production to make a spongy texture inside of a product, or something that's very hard, like this conch shell that's at the beach. So you can see a lot of versatility. This is a slide that I took from some work I did at NASA, where we were trying to imagine what a giant redwood tree could grow into on Mars. That you could send a very low mass seed into space and have it grow and make something much larger for you when you're there. And this has been done in some examples here on the Earth. These are mushroom bricks made out of mycelium fungus, creating a giant building here at the Museum of the Moving Image in New York. Or something as simple as a rose and the fragrance that you might have from a flower that can be extracted and used to make a fragrance. So those are some of the examples of what natural biology can do. So what is synthetic biology, and why does it matter? So I'll come on to that in just a second, but if you excuse me 1 second, I'm just going to close my door because I've got some background noise and my family enjoying themselves. So just give me 1 second. So synthetic biology is trying to make biology easier to engineer. It's a branch of molecular biology, genetic engineering, but it's focused on the key parts of engineering principles applied to biology. If you think about the history of reading, writing, and editing of DNA, DNA was discovered in 1953. The first base pair was written in 1972, and the first base pair was read in 1975. What we're predicting and we're seeing right now is a fifth industrial revolution around the synthesis and sequencing of predictable engineering of biology. So you can see a lot of the tools and technologies for reading, writing, and editing of DNA now exist and are speeding up and getting cheaper. And the tools to design, build, and test biological systems that can produce everything from food to flavors to other ingredients to materials to chemicals to consumer goods and pharmaceuticals. So a huge array of products are now being made and now being built with biology. And a lot of what's driving that is the falling cost of DNA synthesis. That's reading and writing, in particular DNA. And you can see here on the log scale, the dollars per base pair of DNA. You can see on the blue line, reading of DNA has been falling exponentially, mostly due to Illumina and then reducing the price of reading of DNA. And then you have the writing of DNA. That's the log scale, small pieces of DNA in red and long gene synthesis in yellow. Look at the size of the global bioeconomy, the US bioeconomy, it's over $200 billion. So it's more than 2% of US GDP right now. And the overall economic impact is more than $500 billion. And McKinsey recently put out a report showing that the bioeconomy over the next 20 years will grow to $4 trillion. And it's 200 billion in the US, 150 billion the rest of the world right now. Actually, this is some older data. This is from 2018. And if you look at all of the impact of industrial biotechnology and all the enzymatic technologies that come from this, or rather the products that are produced from this, are impacting many fields, from fuels to chemicals to polymers and agriculture. We like to think of the synthetic biology stack as these 5 pieces, these 5 chunks of companies. On the bottom, you have reading and writing DNA. Moving up, you have a tools layer for computer-aided design of genes and genomes, and cloud labs, tools for doing automation, and cloud lab, meaning that you don't actually have to be in the lab. You don't actually have to have a lab in order to do the experiments. Next up, we have organism engineering platforms, and you can see in these organism engineering platforms the ability to design many different kinds of organisms for many different products. And then at the top, you have the application layer, that is the products that are being produced. So I'm just going to dive into a few of these and give some examples. I'm actually hearing, I was just going to look at the participant list because I can hear maybe somebody's not on mute. I'm just going to mute a couple of folks here to, okay, great. Sorry about that. So what we can see then, if we go through, is looking at some of the industry and who's doing what and where they're doing it. We have about 440 synthetic biology companies in the USA, about 96 in the UK, about 28 in France, and about 36 in Canada. If you look, then we have 3 synthetic biology companies in India. These are Reliance Industries, String Bio, and a third company that I'm blanking on right now. Now, the definition of synthetic biology, we let people self-describe whether they're a synthetic biology company or not. And there's a certain sense of branding around synthetic biology that some people say, well, it's nothing new, it's just like genetic engineering, and there's a certain element of truth to that. Other people see it more as a movement to make biology easier to engineer, and behind that movement are investment dollars, and behind that movement are young, passionate founders who want to start new companies and have a sense of identity. So I think that's a good kind of way to look at the whole industry as a movement. If you look within the US, we've got over 200 of those startups are in California, followed by Boston, and then a smattering of other companies throughout the country. If you look, the majority of those companies are in the Bay Area. There's a lot of companies that are popping up all around the Bay Area, working in many different areas, and I'm going to go into detail of some of those shortly. A lot of the money that's come into synthetic biology has come from tech founders from other industries in the technology area who are now investing in reading and writing and editing of DNA. Some of those are from the Y Combinator accelerator. They have been accepting many different bio companies into the program. Ginkgo Bioworks was one of the first. You've probably heard of Ginkgo Bioworks. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on. And the synthetic biology accelerator IndieBio, which is based in San Francisco. Some of the companies that I wanted to talk about are using natural product synthesis. In particular, there's Amaris, which was one of the early companies in this field. They worked on artemisinin, the anti-malarial drug, and you're probably familiar with Jay Kiesling if you work in the area of natural products. Some that you may not have heard of yet is Antheia. Antheia is a company that's using synthetic biology to harness morphine, to make morphine from in yeast cells. So instead of using poppies, it can make yeast to produce it. Arzeda is a company that's making engineering enzymes for many different applications, from food to fuel to materials. They're out of a spin out from David Baker's lab at the University of Seattle. And Ginkgo Bioworks that I mentioned earlier has raised over $400 million in funding for building a series of foundries in Boston. Enzymogen is a competitor to Ginkgo, and they're doing a similar business model based out of Emeryville. And Reliance Industries that I mentioned as a algal to oil platform. And as I said, they are in, excuse me, sorry for keeping on yawning. It's almost 9 o'clock here in the evening, and I've had a long day. So Reliance Industries has an algae to oil program. String Bio that I mentioned earlier is converting methane into protein for animal feed. And there's the CEO and founder, Isil Soubian. So that's thinking about some of the companies at the top of the stack, some of the application companies. There's also companies like Manus Bio, which are making nutraceutical ingredients. They're based in Boston. Or Conagen, which is based in Massachusetts, has a proprietary strain engineering platform. And Dimetrix, which is a new spin-out from Jay Kiesling's company, which is making cannabinoids, a very popular class of molecule. And some of the bigger traditional players are Novartis, that are making drugs using E. coli and streptomyces. Lodo Therapeutics is making novel therapeutics using synthetic biology, in particular using artificial intelligence for optimizing their sequences. Isomerase is a UK-based company that's doing microbial natural product synthesis for drug targets. Danov, you're probably familiar with, the French company founded by Miroslav Radman, who is using Deinococcus for the production of antibiotics and some cosmetic ingredients as well. And Caverdi, one of my favorite companies here in the Bay Area, which is using water recycling for the production of flavors, fragrances, and some cleaning products. And there's a new company that Lisa has spun out from Caverdi called Air Protein, which is looking at the new protein for food space. Living Inks is one of my favorite companies. It's using cyanobacteria and time-lapse ink for the production of inks that can grow. I know there's a lot of cyanobacteria in India in particular, a lot of different interesting pigments. And another pigment company out of Cambridge, UK, called Colorifics. And Colorifics is using bacteria to produce blue dyes for dyeing jeans, denim jeans. Codexis is a protein engineering company. They're based out of Redwood City. They've got some new partnerships just announced recently with DNA synthesis and also with the pharmaceuticals and diagnostics as well. Particularly, they've got enzyme replacement therapies for some rather nasty diseases where they can replace the missing enzyme. That's kind of the end of my formal presentation. I also wanted to highlight that we have the digital event coming up that you might want to participate in. It's a partnering event, September 1st through 3rd. And we also have a weekly newsletter that we send out. We have about 10,000 subscribers, and there's full of interesting stories that you might like on funding and product announcements and technologies. And I wanted to end on a video that I think is quite interesting, and I hope that this is going to play. This is kind of a futuristic look at what the future of synthetic biology might look like, and it might be nice to think about the for some of the discussions. I'm going to play. I think there might be something that allows a setting that allows me to share my audio with you. There we go. It's going to be down here, I think, or maybe here. I think it's going to be in the shared settings. I'm just going to stop sharing and then reshare again. So 1 second. I want to click this button, Share Computer Sound, and optimize your video for a shared video clip. So this should now work. Can everybody still hear me? If you can just type into the chat box if you can still hear me. I think you can. Okay, so let's just press play now.
The bee is an incredible biological machine. This creature's tiny neuron computer makes trillions of calculations as it maneuvers its body with speed and precision. The bee colony is a self-maintaining, self-replicating system programmed to endlessly continue its task of survival. Through our understanding of the DNA code, we are gaining the ability to create new living machines to our design specifications. The natural world is filled with building blocks of the DNA software, which combined with engineering will open breathtaking possibilities. Fully unlocking this code will bring us the greatest technological advancement ever known to our civilization. Imagine modifying the DNA code of plants to grow living buildings. We can revolutionize construction, architecture, and gardening, creating entire cities out of living organic material. The most powerful computing system known to us is the brain. Once we become capable of programming and organizing neurons, we can create new supercomputers, dwarfing our current systems in power and efficiency. This paradigm in technology and evolution can expand life's ability to colonize and populate our solar system and beyond. Living spaceships and organisms modified and engineered to live in different extraterrestrial environments. This new self-aware and self-guiding evolutionary process can take life to the next level of existence.
So I hope that gives you a small glimpse of what an interesting future I think synthetic biology holds for us all. And I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have. If you want to maybe use the raise hand feature, you click on participants and you click, I think, raise hand, or maybe it's in the right hand corner. I'm not sure where the raise hand button is, but if people want to do that, then maybe Kavita, you could call on folks.
Yeah. Thanks, John, for your picture skew and video-rich lecture. And I am hoping someone will ask question. So let me see in a chat box. Sir, what are microbial pigments? How can we dye fabric with bacteria? Question is, what are microbial pigments? And how can we dye the fabric with bacteria? I mean, using synthetic biology, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a whole range of pigments that are produced in nature, particularly cyanobacteria produce a lot of different kinds of pigments with different wavelengths that absorb light at different wavelengths. So I don't know exactly the details of the pigments used for the bacteria for the company Colorifix that I mentioned. It's probably the violet pigment from the violet plant that's then transferred into the bacteria. I do know it's a very interesting process. They just actually have the live bacteria, they mix them with the cloth, and then it gets the dye into the cloth, and then they wash it and kill the bacteria, and then you've got the sheet then. Good question. Yeah, and if people want to,
Thank you, John. And next question is, what about the ethical guidelines of engineered microbes?
Yeah. So, what about the ethical guidelines?
Ethics side of using.
Yeah. Well, I think there's the I haven't explored the ethics side too much. I'd be happy to explore, Karthik, to talk about that. I think from I think there's a few things you've got to consider if you're engineering microbes. One is the bioethics, one is the biosafety, the other is the biosecurity. So I think on the bio, let's address the easy ones first. The biosafety, whether this thing is going to get out and wreak havoc on the environment, or whether it's going to cause some unintended consequences. So I think a lot of the issues are around containment, and then understanding whether what this engineered organism has is going to be any different to what's out there in the environment already. We know there's a lot of genetic recombination happening already in the environment. we know there's a lot of cross-species diversity happening. So is what we're engineering going to cause some downstream effect? I think that's important to know. Then the biosecurity, I think whether this thing is going to get out and be used by somebody for something bad, I think is another concern. And then the bioethics, I think, is interesting, and I'd be glad to hear what you think about it. If you look at the current way, for example, taking the blue jeans example, if you look at the current way that blue jeans are dyed and the amount of chemicals that are used and the dyeing industry, it's absolutely huge. I'm sure you can see it still in many of the rivers in India, or particularly Bangladesh, where a lot of the clothes are being dyed, the environmental damage that it's causing. So I think whenever we think about bioethics, whether we should do something, we have to look at the way that the environment is being damaged by our current processes and the amount of carbon that we're putting into the air and the pollution that we're creating for the water, and then we can weigh that up against a new technological solution like synthetic biology, and what does that provide, and what are the costs and benefits. I think most people are not living in a primitive environment where we want to go back without having electricity or hot water. But there's a cost to that electricity and a cost to that hot water. So I think that's how I like to look at all these problems from an ethics point of view. What is the alternative, and is what synthetic biology is offering a better alternative?
Got it. And there are some interesting questions as well. I mean, there are many questions on this use of dye and all those questions. But there is one question related to NASA, like how like your experience with NASA. So how much relevance the synthetic biology in the NASA related works, like NASA related?
Sure. So at NASA we had a number of projects around creating organisms that could survive in extreme environments. That's what my PhD was in cyanobacteria that could survive extreme cold, high radiation. It's pretty difficult to get biology to survive, to get life to survive outside of the Earth's atmosphere. So that's one issue to think about. The second was projects around practical settlement technologies for living on the moon, living on Mars, living on the International Space Station, and using those technologies for the production of food, or the production of biomaterials, or the cleaning of wastewater, or the production of fuel. Those were all projects that we looked at and we considered. And we also looked at creating space economies around biotechnology and what that might look like, and using the resources that we would find on some of the asteroids, the water, the carbon, and also some resources that we would find on the moon. There's a lot of water on the moon, and there's about 0.03% by mass carbon containing molecules on the moon. So the moon isn't this particular, it's a dry place, but there is ice in certain pockets, in certain craters. And so we did a lot of studies, and you can find these on Google Scholar if you search for my name, on particular missions around using synthetic biology for space missions.
Yes, John. So another question is, what is the major role of AI in the synthetic biology? Because we are in the looking forward to, right? So to develop this.
Yeah, I think there's
role of AI. AI.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of room for artificial intelligence in synthetic biology. In particular, we're so bad at engineering biology still that we do need these tools and these technologies to come in. And particularly AI, my colleague at NASA used to think of AI as a telescope that you could put up to the sky, and you could collect data with it, and you could point that telescope at new sets of data, and it would use AI to produce new findings that you couldn't find elsewhere. So I think that's kind of the power of AI, is that biology produces a lot of messy data that we don't understand. And if we can get our design of experiments set up very nicely and think about them ahead of time, then you have a flywheel of constant improvement in all of your experiments if you're feeding the data into AI.
Interesting. There is some overlapping questions where people are asking how synthetic biology is different from genome editing, genetic engineering, and all that. Can you?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think synthetic biology is a movement to make biology easier to engineer. If you look at the genetic engineering, a lot of genetic engineers are focused on trying to engineer a particular organism to perform a particular function, and they're trying to make a particular application or a particular product. If you look at the synthetic biology community, they're taking a step back. They're looking at the process of engineering, the design, build, and test system for engineering, and they're trying to understand what does that process look like and how can we make it easier to engineer. Just like people in the early days of electronic engineering looked at the process of electronic engineering and tried to create a more mature discipline from it. So synthetic biology is a more mature discipline than genetic engineering, and it's taking it to the next level with tools like AI, automation, DNA synthesis, high throughput synthesis, and trying to focus on the process that we go through. So synthetic biology is not necessarily about what you make, but it's about the way that you make it.
So the chances of errors will be, I mean, of course, errors will be there, but how much chances of reducing it? Or
how much chances of what, sorry?
Reducing the errors. I mean, if there are errors, I mean, people do make mistakes, right? Because it's a new technology, and there'll be chances for mistakes. So do you think that would be the problem?
Are you talking about environmental release and organisms getting out into the environment?
Yes,
those kind of errors?
Yes.
Well, I think going back to the bioethics question, it's looking at what is our cost of inaction. And if you look at the amount of CO2 that we're putting out into the environment right now and the problems that is causing, or if you look at the water pollution and the problems that is causing, or if you look at chemical manufacturing and the byproducts that are produced from chemical manufacturing, there are a lot of errors that are going wrong with our current industrial manufacturing systems. If you look at biology, on the other hand, there's nothing going wrong with biology in nature. It is happy, it is productive, and it creates these renewable ecosystems. So I think we've got to look to nature and how we do things and use nature more to produce these products in the future, and get away from this fossil fuel economy, which is very polluting and very damaging to the environment. And I think that's the bigger topic that we should be addressing. Not. I think we should be looking at the biosafety of everything that we produce with biotechnology, but the cost of our inaction on other things is a bigger danger, I think.
Yes. And going back to space, a question: what microbes are used for the extraction of minerals from lunar rock? Extraction of minerals.
Yeah, so there's it's the same organisms that would be used for the extraction of minerals from rocks here on Earth, which would be, for example, Acidothiobacillus ferrooxidans is one that's used for copper biomining. And that would be the organism that I would use for similar, if I was going to try to extract lunar resources here on extract resources from lunar materials. And there were some studies that have been done on simulated lunar regolith. It was with one of the startups that I was with before called Universal Biomining. So I think that's a good example.
Mm-hmm. And current situation, COVID, do you think synthetic biology has something in mind to help others? That's my question.
Yeah, so does synthetic biology have a
role in?
Can it help with COVID? Well, yeah, I think it's already helping a lot with COVID. If you look at all of the antibody therapies that are out there for the finding of new antibodies and getting them out into scale up and into the clinic for treating patients, they're all made with synthetic DNA. So I think there's a big role for synthetic biology to play in antibody therapeutics. There's also a big role to play in the vaccine development. If you look at Moderna, they're using synthetic RNA, and that's the leading vaccine candidate right now. And if you look at the diagnostics as well, there are two companies competing to get their CRISPR diagnostic into the marketplace. That's Mammoth Bioscience and Sherlock Bioscience, both using a CRISPR-based detection for COVID. So synthetic biology is having a big impact in a lot of these areas.
Nice, interesting. So SynBioBeta is having any plans?
Regarding COVID, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Well, we're covering COVID a lot, and we produced a timeline in Forbes.com with leaps by Bayer. And if people haven't seen my column on Forbes.com, I encourage you to Google my name and Forbes, and you'll see a lot of our articles. And in particular, that one where we do a timeline on COVID treatments. So we're doing as much as we can to help everybody connect. And we had the CEO of Moderna, we had the CEO of Moderna speak on one of our events recently, and we also had a talk on epitope mapping of the viral structure as well. So there's a lot of activities that we're doing to bring together the COVID community around this. And there's a lot of people in the synthetic biology industry, like Ginkgo Bioworks, who are providing services to the COVID response. Ginkgo is providing a testing service. Berkeley Lights is providing a cell sorting service for people who've had COVID to find the cells that can produce antibodies. Twist is synthesizing DNA. GenScript is synthesizing DNA. So there's a lot of people in the community that are working towards it. RIL has as using all of their synthetic biology facilities for some novel ideas for treating COVID as well. So a lot of activity going on.
Yeah, interesting question. I was hoping one question from the participants. There is a question: can synthetic biology be implemented for converting neural transmissions to some readable format? I mean, role of synthetic biology in brain, basically.
Yeah, well, cool. I'm glad somebody wanted to drift into that area. As I said, it's an area of a lot of interest to me.
Yes.
Can it be implemented for converting neural transmissions to some readable format?
Yes.
Well, I think that would depend on what those neural transmissions are. So, I mean, let's take a specific example. I mentioned Kundalini awakening in yoga and the chakra system as well, which again, I find it amusing that I'm talking about this at a science conference, because I think the majority of scientists think that, certainly, well, I'd be curious actually to know, I think the majority of Western scientists, probably 90% or 95%, would say that this idea of the chakras and the energy centers of the body is pseudoscience. And actually, if you look up Reiki or on Wikipedia, it says at the top it's pseudoscience. So Reiki is the same as with these chakras. Now, I know for a fact now that it's not pseudoscience. I also would have agreed with that before. Now I've experienced it. I think it's an incredibly powerful thing. I have no idea what it is, and I'm not sure that we do know what it is from looking in the scientific literature. So could synthetic biology be used to pick up that signal and be able to read it out somewhere else? I don't know what the signal is. Is it an electrical signal? Is it? I guess it's electrophysiological. I guess it's a charge coming down the neurons, electrical signal. Has it been measured? I'm curious whether anybody on the call knows. So in answer to the question, yes, assuming that we know a little bit more about it, we can use it to measure and amplify the signal and get a reading out from it. I'm just curious because I don't know too much about it, about what is known about it, and whether then we could read it.
Yeah, there are things going on, not scientifically too much on the spiritual side, but people take it as a part and parcel of their life. Like everyone tries to do it, and someone succeeds. And there are some major organizations that help in the breathing in, breathing out, and it helps to reduce the stress a lot. And of course, there is a methodology how to do it. And so the yoga, so many varieties are there, and people practice it every day. Like that is a habit for people, actually. I won't say everyone, but there are people who are very systematic in doing that, because it helps to reduce the stress. And how it does to scavenge the free radical species and all that, it might be an interesting area, but sometimes people shy away think about it openly unless you really sit with them and talk. And
well, as I said, there's been this split between I think it was really in the 17th century, this split between the scientists and the humanities and the sciences really split in the 17th century, because there was so much religious dogma that the religious authorities were really abusing their power. And so it split this rift between the humanities and the sciences, which I think is now time to bring it back together again. And I think these kind of mysterious forces that we're seeing around prana and chi are probably the way to do it.
how
so I'm very
people,
interested.
Yeah, there are people who are very much working on it, like the spiritual side. Say you see this yogis living in cave without food, water, and how are they living for a long time, and what is there happening? Like there is a way how they control the environment, and they manage themselves very well. So yeah, there are so many intriguing things. Yeah, let me see any more questions. Like, how can synthetic biology help in cancer therapies? John, can you?
Yeah. So, well, there are a number of companies that are making CAR T therapies. So, chimeric antigen receptor T cells for identifying, sequencing. First of all, you can sequence a cancer. You can identify what kind of cancer it is. You can then make a target to attack that kind of cancer. You can take out your own cells from your body. You can engineer them to fight the cancer. You can put the cells back in your body and remove the cancer. So there's some very powerful technologies and great companies that are working in that area. I think also that synthetic biology is enabling us to remove things from the food chain that we know cause cancer. If you look at the things that are correlated with cancer, they are sugar, red meat, alcohol. And if you think about the things that synthetic biology is able to replace, certainly there are sugar substitutes that are produced using synthetic biology. If you go to my Forbes column, you can see that I wrote recently about a product called Pure Cane, which is a fermented sweetener made by Amyris, and that's using the natural sweetener Reb A, I think, which is from, I'm blanking. What's the sweetener that's from? I can't remember. Stevia. So if you look at the impact of that, my daughter actually loves to bake cakes, and I've stopped taking refined sugar, so she now bakes me cakes using this Pure Cane instead, and they're pretty good. They're probably about 80% of the regular cake. So I think that's important. The reduction of sugar will reduce cancer, and that's very well documented. That the increase in sugar increases cancer. The second is the consumption of red meat, and I've eaten bacon that's made by mycelium by the company At Last. I've eaten. I'm actually wearing my Impossible T-shirt from the company Impossible Foods. They're taking beef out of the Burger King patty, the Burger King burger. So again, red meat is linked to cancer, and they're doing different products that don't have red meat. So I think there's definitely therapies for cancer. There's also products that are being produced by synthetic biology companies that remove cancer from the food chain as well.
Oh, very interesting. People moving away from non-vegetarianism, and so interesting. So just now Chancellor entered, and there are some of questions, common questions from the biotechnology point of view. Like food production, crop improvement. What is the role of synthetic biology in a sustainable agriculture, and what is the role of synthetic biology in food production? And so very relevant question. So being a kind of cost-effective technology, how it is going to meet out everybody, like if it is going to contribute in food production. Synthetic biology, I think it is in food production.
Yeah, I think it is going to contribute to food production. I think it's already contributing to food production. There's about 1/3 of the bioeconomy is in food and ag, and improvements in crop productivity, improvements in the kind of fruit and vegetables that we eat in terms of the sweetness or the shelf life, and also in terms of the novel kinds of foods that we can eat around things like the ingredients, nutraceuticals that people can produce. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for food and ag in particular.
Thank you, John. And some more questions. Can synthetic biology make insulin faster, cheaper, and better?
Yeah, it could definitely make it faster, and that was one of the first products of Genentech in the 1970s, was the ability to make insulin in E. coli instead of having to get it from the pancreases of pigs. It can make it cheaper, but there are some of the issues around the healthcare system, particularly in the US, that means that insulin has actually gotten more expensive over the last few years, which is very sad, particularly if you're diabetic. But in general, it's still going to be cheaper to ferment insulin than it is to extract it from pigs. And then can it make it better? It can. There's different insulins that are time-release insulins in the body that can target the release of the drug at a particular frequency, which means you don't need to inject it so frequently. And there's also options for having your own cells so that you can engineer them to then make insulin. So it's definitely can make it faster, better, and cheaper.
Thanks, John, for answering patiently all the questions at this hour where you are feeling really tired and sleepy. So, and we are looking forward to have you really physically here later at some time after everything settles. So thanks once again. And a chancellor is here, so we'll proceed with the sessions. Over to you, Jabez, the host.
Great. Thank you all. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Bye.